Cuthbertson coming from the pod to record another episode of Off the Cuff. This week we're lucky enough to have Margaret Llewellyn OBE. Margaret's 40-year career has seen her own and operate a container shipping line, port terminals and road haulage fleet. She's also been Deputy Chair of the Port of Dover, Chair of the Dover Harbour Pension Fund, Chair of the Network Rail Supervisory Board, Chair of the Tourism Advisory Board for Wales and Vice Chair of the Welsh Development Agency. It's therefore no surprise that in 2004 she received an OBE for services to economic development in Wales and is a former Welsh Woman of the Year. Welcome, Margaret.
Thank you.
So, as I said in my introduction, you've navigated your way across many different areas of transport. Can you tell us a bit about your career journey?
I actually was going to be a teacher, but I was fortunate enough to go to Cambridge. And as you know, Oxbridge have these milk rounds where all the big companies turn up to recruit. My father and grandfather had been ship owners. When the milk round came round, a company called Ocean Transport and Trading, which was the largest shipping company in the world, always took 4 graduates from Oxbridge every year to put them through the management training course and then obviously to senior management. So I phoned my father, told him I was applying, and he said, "They're not going to take you, Margaret. I don't believe they've ever recruited a woman in management." So I said, "Well, I know more than probably the other people that are applying." So obviously I applied. I got one of the graduate training positions. The boys got sent to Singapore, Hong Kong, Elder Dempster in Nigeria, and I got sent to London E15 to a freight forwarding company. But I probably learnt more about customs, clearance, how goods should be handled in that scenario than probably they did in the much more protective world, if you like, of where they went. After I finished that, I went to a company that was owned by P&O, Tate & Lyle and Ocean. They were chemical tankers that operated all around the world. And I became a marketing manager and did that for 2 years. And then what happened was I saw a job advertised for commercial manager, British Transport Docks Board, which is known today as Associated British Ports. And in those days had 19 ports. So I thought, well, I know an awful lot about ports. I was fixing the chemical tankers into a lot of the British and European ports. And I thought, well, I shall apply. So I went for the interview. And lo and behold, one of the men who sat on the board of my father's company was actually now the commercial director of British Transport Docks Board. He never said anything to me. The 5 people sat there, they interviewed me. At the end of it, he walked me out and he said, "Don't worry, Margaret, you've got the job. They think because you're a woman, you're a patsy, but I know you better than that." So I stayed there for about 5 years. I brought Maersk to the UK because Maersk were not part of the conference and therefore could not get into the assigned container ports, the big ones. So I came up with a scheme for them to go to 2 smaller ports, one Hull and one on the Thames, so that they could start the development of their container business, which of course today they've either been the largest or the second largest in the world since then. But then what happened was I built a container terminal and fell in love with my customer. And of course, I did not believe that I should work with a customer if I wanted to marry them. So I decided to leave. They wanted me to stay, but I said, no, it's all right. And I got a job as Deputy Director of Freight of British Waterways Board. And British Waterways in those days didn't just have canals, but they had ports, and they still do. There's still a few ports, all dotted around the country, from Gloucester, Sharpness, up to Caledonian Canal with Fort William and Inverness, and all over the country. So I ran that for a number of years. And the family business, if you like, my husband's side, who was the largest shareholder in a container company that operated their own ports, he got a contract to move 200,000 tonnes of coal from Wales to Northern Ireland. It was a smokeless, it's anthracite, and it was very expensive coal, and they wanted a special system. They wanted it containerised, which was never heard of. It was bulk handled, but then the problem was it degraded. And then they were even fussier because not only did they want us to have containers, but they wanted us to run it from trains out of the washeries direct. And they needed a port in Wales. So I said, I'm probably going to get better things out of being Welsh. So if you like, I'll run that business. So I built a container terminal. I had 400 special 8-foot open top containers to put the coal into. And I had 40 rail wagons that I ran on a daily basis during the week, with the coal being brought down to go on the ship. The business developed into a proper liner service because obviously the coal could go in the bottom of the ship, but you could take things like insulation, chocolate, Weetabix on the deck. And I didn't sell that business until about 2001, but I kept the terminal as a separate company. And so actually I operated it even after I'd sold to Mersey-Docks the actual shipping line for another 6 years. And then in the course of it all, as you quite rightly said in my background, I ended up doing other things. So I was first of all asked by the DfT, would I like to go on a board of the trust ports? And they originally talked to me about London, but I said London is not for me because it's more of a port for just controlling the waterway. It's not an operational port, unlike Dover, which was obviously the largest ferry port in Europe, but was a lot more than that. We did all the Del Monte fruit, and we started to develop the cruise business using the old terminals that had originally been the train terminals that came in for the ferries to go in the 50s to France. So it was really good. And within a year, I'd been made deputy chairman, and I remained on that board for the full 9 years, which, as you know, most people don't do 9 years. Since then, as you say, I've done all manner of things, because once I got onto Dover, Rhodri Morgan, the then First Minister of Wales, called me in and said, well, what do you want to be on for Wales, Margaret? I said, well, I suppose it should be the Welsh Development Agency, because it's about business, small business developing, and big business being brought in to invest in Wales. And so I went on to that for a number of years until they ceased having it, which was a shame, really, because it was known throughout the world. It was a very much more to the forefront of teaching people about Wales. And then in later years, in 2012, I went on to the Finance Wales, which became the Development Bank, and I did that for 9 years. So I've had a fantastic career. Today, I'm on the board of Peel Ports, which is Liverpool and Clyde Ports and the Medway Ports. And obviously, we deal with still a lot of rail freight and hopefully more in the future. I am still the chairman of the Welsh Rail Supervisory Board, which is a really interesting board because it's every operator that operates in Wales attends the boards. So there's always a senior person from each of the companies. So it means they can share ideas. They can share best practice. If somebody's got an issue, they can actually ask somebody else who knows perhaps better than them. I also changed the board in some way because I put ORR on it. My attitude was, if ORR are going to assess the performance of particularly Network Rail, then it's better that they understand the issues from within. It's actually worked very well.
Wow, that really is an enormous amount of experience you've had there. And what projects are crossing your desk at the moment?
I'm working with the second largest producer of methanol in the world, who has always just sold their methanol as a sort of wholesale product for making things and obviously for using things. But what they see is that there's an opportunity, particularly with green methanol, for it to become a product that can be used in the transport industry. And also because of net zero, its compliance, really. If you look at Europe now, by 2030, most ports have to have onshore power so that the ships can't actually run with their own engines in the ports. And the problem is, as we all know, including the UK, the grids are not up to being able to do it. And so they have to find alternative options. And so we're looking at doing onshore power through methanol, which tends to be cheaper than diesel. It's a solution for the power of the port itself, certainly a solution for the onshore power. We're looking at certain ports, starting off with the bigger ones, because obviously they're more conscious that they want the lines to come, and it means a lot more to them. An awful lot of the container market, particularly people like Maersk, have now got 38, 40 ships on order that are fueled by methanol rather than diesel. It's regarded in the shipping and transport industry as probably the fuel of the future because it's relatively easy to get, but it's very compliant.
Absolutely, and it does sound like it would be a good solution for the government to look at regarding net zero for other transport industries as well. What do you think the government needs to concentrate on?
part of the problem is we've thrown a lot of money at lots of different options without actually saying which are the ones that are viable. And there's nothing wrong with using big companies sometimes. You need the big boys that have got money and are used to these big projects.
And what do you think is the most important transformation within transport, and how should the government work with industry to ensure its potential is maximised?
Oh, that's a good question. If I'm honest about it, you know what I feel about when we did the Williams review. The flaw in the railways is that the people that actually operate them don't own the asset. And unless you own the asset, you're wasting money. They don't have the substance to be able to keep developing. Ships are an example. After 25 years, most people that have built their ships are ready to sell them on, but they sell them on. They don't sell them for scrap. They sell them to probably somewhere in the Middle East or Far East or somewhere where they're looking to start a little service. And so they've got another life. And it's the same with trains. If you look at it, trains have still got a value even at their end of their life. And so this thing about, they're very short-term contracts. You can't operate trains on short-term contracts. It's unsettling for the people that work there, and it's unsettling for the people that fund them, and you'll never get quality.
And of course, if someone else owns something, you're less likely to put the effort in order to maximise that, because you're not going to get the full benefit.
Exactly. That's the thing. You'll probably put it into somewhere else, and you'll know that you're going to be there for the next 25, 30 years. But at least make sure that they've got decent contracts to operate under.
Absolutely, because that gives everybody security. And as you say, it means that they're more likely to invest their time and their energy and also their money. So what do you
And then you attract the best people as well.
Exactly.
Don't you? Because the best people know that they've got a long-term career future as well, which is important.
Indeed. So what are you going to be pressing on the new government of whatever colour they need to do within the first days of taking office?
Oh dear, where do we start? Well, I think they should all stop talking about the health service as is, because we all know that it almost needs to go back to the beginning and start reorganising itself again. There's no point in throwing money at a system that is so heavy in the administration area and so low in the actual people that are doing it. You know me, I put my foot in it on a number of occasions when people have said to me, oh, I work for the NHS. And then I say, don't you think we should get half of the management that you've got? And then they'll say, oh, well, I am one of those managers. But then they say, actually, you're right. It's top heavy. But nobody ever discusses it, do they? We look at everything as though they're in silos rather than looking at it and saying, what would we do if we were setting up a health service tomorrow? What would we do? And actually, I do think some of these ideas about using pharmacists, if you go to the States, they even have rooms where they can examine people. It doesn't have to be in the hospital. The GPs used to do quite a lot of work too. So the whole thing has to be completely restructured, I think.
And what do you think should be the top transport priority for the party that gets elected?
Integrated transport, and seeing if they really understand what integrated transport means. You won't get people off roads and out of their cars unless it is a relatively easy proposition. And I always tell the story in the 50s, when I was growing up, Cardiff station, which was a magnificent central station, but its bus station was literally 20 yards from when you got off the train. So you got onto your bus to take you to wherever you lived in Cardiff at the bus station. And it had a cafe there, and it was pleasant and it was easy and nobody worried about it. When you look at most of the places now, we've built the bus stations at one end of the town and we've built the rail stations at another. We will not get people totally committed to either one of those forms of transport unless it's easy for them.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's even the case in London. So if you look at Victoria Station, the bus station is actually quite a way away from the main underground. And people get very confused as to where to go. So, of course, it's not only about passengers. As you referenced before, you and I have worked together on freight, and we were working on making sure that it was given the attention it needs in the William Shapps review. So is enough being done to ensure that more freight comes off the road and goes onto rail?
The ambition's there. I mean, the 75% growth rate is there, but as we said in the report, there has to be changes. The issue is that pathways are never going to be given to freight if the passengers have to have the priority. So the loop system that I suggested, when we do lines up, usually there's some space to put freight going on a parallel line for just a short distance so that the passenger train can go past and then go back in. I think that should be looked at. I'm very pleased to see in Southampton where DB Ports have actually come up with a solution of offering their customers a cheaper option if they go by train than if they just pick them up with their road vehicles. And it's grown, I think, about 9% in the first 6 months that they've offered this discounted way of doing it. The other thing that I find that's quite odd these days is that often these trains run one way with nothing in them because they're so obsessed with getting the boxes back to the ports that very rarely do they think of what could we take on the way back. They've got to think a bit more innovatively.
Earlier on, when you were talking about career, you mentioned the fact that you were slightly dismissed being a woman. Do you think that enough is being done to change the demographic in the industry?
Well, I never had any problems because I just assumed that they'd chosen me because I was right for the job. So I chose to really ignore it. And I think that's one of the things that women have to do. They have to get it in their heads that, yes, maybe they have to be a bit better to begin with. But once people get the confidence in you, they'll keep you through your career. And interestingly, since I've been on Peel, I actually spoke at a podcast on International Women's Day to the female management team of Peel. And in fact, some of them are developing very well. And only 2 weeks ago, I had a photograph sent from one of them who was sitting in a gantry crane in Dublin being taught how to drive it. Which is, in the past, you don't think about women crane drivers, but most of the ports have got some female crane drivers now and some forklift truck drivers. Anybody that can drive a truck or a car can drive anything in a port with training. So I think it's making people try and think what they'd like to do. And I know that a lot of the ports, for instance, have been trying to bring people in from schools to teach them the sort of jobs that are available. But the other thing about it is, and you've probably come across it more than I have actually in the rail industry, but in the port industry as well, is that automation is going to take place. I went to London Gateway, and London Gateway can be a fully automated port, so that it's all done from a box in a room with very high technical people. And actually, even though people worry about the fact that will it affect jobs, yes, it will affect the lower types of jobs, but actually it's a great opportunity for children going through their education now because that's the things that they're being taught. These are going to be really good jobs for the future. And I think both in the rail industry and in the shipping industry, port industry in particular, you will start to see that.
And if you could be remembered for one thing in your career, what would it be?
I was one of the founder members of the Women's International Shipping and Trading Association, which today is a big worldwide organisation for women in shipping. It's shipping, transport, and also all of the skills around it. So, they can be maritime lawyers or other things, but it's really a group of women that look upon themselves as successful and develop those that are coming up through the field. So we didn't know at the time, there was only 6 of us working in London that put it together to meet for a drink at Christmas. And then the Rotterdam girls and the Hamburg girls said, well, we'd like to come. And then the year after they invited us back and that's how it started. But, they forget in those days, Christina Onassis was in it because her father had died and she'd been left with the shipping company. And so she was in there. And it was interesting, actually. There were a lot of female ship owners in the Mediterranean where perhaps their father retired. They brought the girls along. Portugal had quite a few female ship owners. So we think moving ahead now, but that was a long, long time ago. In fact, it'll be 50 years, I think. Yes, 50 years later on this year.
Women owning it even then and owning it even more now.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. If you look at the cruise line business, for instance, many of the senior bosses of the big major lines are women. They've worked themselves through, give people fantastic careers if they're committed and you're committed to identifying those that have the ability.
So, yes, indeed, it does show that with commitment, you can achieve anything. And obviously in politics at the moment, we've got the rise of social media. And do you think that's going to impact the election when it happens on the 4th of July?
Yes, I think they focus on some things more so than others. People don't really understand what people stand for. And the media tell the people what they think they should know or what they think should be done. And the sad part is, and I'll be honest about this, I think that part of the problem is that many of the people that they've had either going into politics or being, if you like, special advisors or whatever, in the recent past, they haven't got any background in the businesses that they're going to end up looking after or the experience in the sector that they're going to look after. And I think that's part of the problem, because if you don't know how difficult a thing is, it's easy to say, oh, we're going to change it, but you'll never change it. It'll probably get even worse. And that's part of the problem, I think.
And this, of course, is one of the reasons why it's so important that people like you are involved in these reviews, like you were involved in the Williams Shapps review. So what message would you give to the current parties as to how you feel that they should engage more with the sectors as you're talking about?
They should sit down with the people that are actually running these businesses and understand what they're doing. You want to get people to work with you. I'm a great believer in, you train everybody to do everything in your organisation if you can. Is there anything wrong with the owner of a manufacturing business being able to do what they're manufacturing on the shop floor if it came to it? The only thing I never did was, Fiona, I never drove the gantry crane, but I sent the message to the girl last week to congratulate them. My dockers, they knew I was scared of height. I wouldn't go up them. But that was the only thing. I would drive the forklift truck, I would do the check-in, and I'd do everything if and when it was required. And that's what people should be like. And they enjoy themselves. They go off and they do other things, and they do it on their own initiative rather than being scared of doing anything.
Absolutely. Don't be scared. Just own it. So with that, we come to the end of another interview with a very awe-inspiring and trailblazing woman. And it does show that with commitment and dedication, you can affect change and shape the future of the country. Again, something that shouldn't be lost on anyone at the moment, considering there's an election, so please go out and vote. So thank you to the listeners. If you have any questions regarding the podcast today, please feel free to comment. If you think it's worth coming back, please like and subscribe. If you feel you need something to tide you over to the next podcast, please buy my book Party Games on Amazon. And on that note, I'll see you next time. Hope you have a good week, one and all.